Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be reviewing folk tales. I know that you've learned about folk tales a little bit in elementary school and you've had some exposure to them as kids, but we're going to look at it in more sophisticated ways this year. I've pulled up for you the first page of the document that you're ultimately going to be doing a worksheet on. I'm just going to read over this and explain a few things as I go. So, folk tales overview. The term folk tales, or folklore, is a literary genre that encompasses a vast array of stories which have been passed down from generation to generation. Most folk tales have their roots in oral traditions, stories that have been told and retold, often changing so that there are many versions of the same story. Folk tales may be directed at children or adults, however, the majority of folk tales are enjoyed by all ages. One thing that I want to emphasize here is that the oral tradition means that these stories were not written down. They were said out loud for generations and generations. So there really are many versions of the same story. Even if we look at something as simple as the Three Little Pigs, you'll find that there's, a version where the pigs all survive and run to the next brother's house. There's a version where the pigs get eaten as the wolf blows down their house. There's a version where the wolf just goes away at the end. There's a version where the wolf dies at the end. So tons of different versions, and that's okay. There's not necessarily one true or correct version. Okay, let's take a look at this next paragraph here. Folktales come from all over the world and are an important part of a culture's heritage, and in many cases, their spiritual beliefs. Often the same characters appear in many different stories within a culture's folklore. While folktales are always meant to entertain, they may also explain why things are as they are, teach proper behavior and cultural values, or reveal insights into human nature and behavior. Folktales are always short stories that are set in the past. The settings are often fictional, but also maybe real places. Characters are usually not well developed, and themes of good and evil are prominent. Often plots involve trickery, repeating events, and good triumphing over evil. Most folktales also involve some aspect of magic or the supernatural and could not actually happen in real life. Folklore includes several subgenres, and these are the ones we're going to look at: fables, fairy tales, tall tales, legends, myths. However, not every folktale fits perfectly into one of those subgenres. Some stories may seem to fall into more than one, and others may not fit into any. Ballads, parables, ghost stories, urban legends, those are also considered folklore. So now I love this chart on this next page here. It really breaks down for you those 5 that are very, very common. And I like that it gives you example stories for you to think about as well. So a fable, short story, usually involves personified animals. They are meant to teach you a lesson. This would be like our Three Little Pigs. The tortoise and the hare. I don't know if you know these other stories, but the tortoise and the hare, the turtle and the rabbit going on the race. You might know that one. You can also think of the Three Little Pigs here. Very simple plot, kind of like little children's stories, animal characters, a very, very clear message is delivered at the end. So like in the Three Little Pigs, it's make sure you work hard to do things the right way the first time. Then we've got fairy tales, which are a little bit more complex than our fables. These ones typically have royalty, mythical creatures, good or evil, happy endings, and magic. They don't mention that here, but magic is a big part of a lot of fairy tales as well. These are a bunch of our like Disney movies. So they mention Snow White and the Seven Dwarves here. They mention some other stories from different cultures that you may be familiar with as well. Think about Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. Those types of movies are fairy tales. A tall tale and a legend, these ones are kind of tricky because there are some ways in which they are similar. So a tall tale is told as if it is a true story, but many parts of the story are so exaggerated that it's obviously fiction. Tall tales are humorous, and they feature what they call, and this is a real term, a swaggering hero. The stories from the American Old West, those are really great tall tales. A legend is a story that takes place in a specific time in the past, focuses on real people who do extraordinary or heroic deeds. It can be very embellished, but it's told like they are true stories, not humorous. Okay, so this is something that we're going to see as one of the differences here. Tall tales tend to be humorous. Legends are not humorous. Legends are much more serious. So let's take a look at some examples here. Paul Bunyan. Pecos Bill is a really famous one. So Pecos Bill has one story where a tornado comes to town and he jumps on the tornado like he's riding a bull, and he like leads it out of the town to save everybody. So really obviously untrue and kind of dramatic, and kind of just silly and goofy. Whereas ones like King Arthur or Robin Hood for our legends, those are a little bit more serious and dramatic and more like an action film as opposed to like a comedy. And then the last one that we have here are our myths. We're going to spend the next 2 weeks looking at mythology more closely. Right now, what you need to know is it often has supernatural events and beings like gods and goddesses. It explains how something in nature came to be or why something is the way that it is. If you are familiar at all with like Percy Jackson and those books or those movies, Percy Jackson deals a lot with Greek mythology. And then we've got from the Marvel universe, Thor and Loki. That's like Norse mythology. So we're thinking about these gods and goddesses with special powers that are ruling the world, essentially. So that's our mythology. Now, your assignment is to come down here to the next page, and you're going to decide what each example is. So if you read this one and you decide it's a legend, you would write B. If it's a fairy tale, A. A fable, C. Does that make sense? So you're just going to match up this key over here to each of the individual examples. And when you're finished, you'll submit that back to Schoology, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding of the differences between those. While you're working through this, I suggest keep coming back up to this chart, looking at those differences, getting probably more into these characteristics to help you differentiate between the different types. And if you have any questions, let me know.